Well, as many of you know, since I've gathered about 500 of people over the last 2 months, I started this video series, and I've been new to Grasshopper in the last year and a half, and I really haven't spent any time on Rhino prior to that. So I learned Rhino indirectly through Grasshopper, going pretty hard into it. I did know a bit about Mesh Mixer, SketchUp back in 2010, but my job and the direction of the school has definitely pushed me in that way. Now, I do come from a math and computers background 30 years ago, 25 years ago, but I've been making sculptures, so I have a really interesting, I think, way of thinking how to put things together that aren't really architectural. They're more, how would I assemble things? How would I manufacture and make things? So what I have here is a script that I'm very happy to play with, and I want to show you. I've been doing I'm going to make 1001 scripts. I'm not going to stop. I put them up on GitHub for free. I've started to introduce this little skeleton for scale just to have fun. But let's go in and see what kind of nodes are in use here. I'm going to try and get through this in under 15 minutes, which shouldn't be a hard trouble, except my kids are so damn loud in the background. What can I say? So it's a Friday night, so let's just deal with it. I am one that understands ranges, and what I've been doing to date is basically building point systems. And you're like, well, what's the point of a point system? Well, there it is. There's the point systems. And you're like, well, that's not too interesting. And there's the other point system. And they're hard to see, but when you interpolate them, you can then loft them. So I basically grab a curve and grab another curve and I loft them. So that's what I think is I think I need a surface. I then will find the curves to make it the points. But what I've done now is not only just happy with bringing in the trig and playing with that and changing the forms around this, which is actually pretty amazing. Now, it's pretty slow script because if you think about it, it's got to go through all those extrusions have to happen. But what I've started to do now is get my mind into the creating of the sets. I want to have more control between the trigonometry and the ranges. So, you just keep going deeper. You go deeper and deeper and break it up more and more and more. And this isn't for everybody. It's not for people that want apps and quick buttons and clicking. It's really getting into it to discover the geometries that can be changed just subtly by just playing a little bit with the ranges or playing with maybe not set difference. Maybe that's not what I want to be doing. Maybe I should be jumping in here and going in the sets and looking in the sets intersection, set majority, set union. And so deeper and deeper and deeper I go, I do see the need to keep touching up my Python skills. And I imagine I might be writing script in time, but I really do visually understand these nodes paired next to what's being created right beside me. Very excited for that. All I do is generate that lofted surface. All that work in that script just to get to that lofted surface, which some people would say, well, just make two curves in Rhino and loft them. And I'll be like, no, I want to be able to transform this from the maths and get deeper and deeper in. And I think that's where I maybe have a little bit of an interest that goes beyond other people, but I know out there's people that really want to do that. Then what I do is with that surface is simply interpret that surface through a point deformation. I think it's a surface from points. Yeah, that's all it is. I didn't do anything too tricky on it. Take it apart, put it back together, loft those surfaces again, and then flatten them. And you're like, well, where'd they all go? I mean, they got to be around here somewhere. My lofted forms, but basically thinking of my breps, how I can bring them together. And I'm actually doing the little bit that's between them. It's a very subtle little tiny loft. So when I do bring them together, I've got the ability to grab the curves on each side and loft those. So I can get the section between those two that have been extruded perfectly the normals, which is really what I'm all about, is I want to have as much control over not having to bring this in the Rhino, which I see so often happening, and then doing the extrusion from normals. Write the scripts that do that. Then when I get through that, I can bring it together as one brep, and then it's just a fine, simple, transformative example of rotation after rotation. 3D to 3D. Now, this script would slow down to probably 20 seconds to process the Boolean union here. So a solid union here is probably best done taking that out and then putting it into Rhino after the bake, and then definitely doing that. So if you think of this in sections, that's basically what's happened is I've gotten all the way to this unit, then I've done the transformations and the multiples of that through a couple other ranges that stay parametric. And if you change the original, that's what's just amazing about this, is you change a subtle little number here. Like if you go from 4, shut off the solver maybe, move that down to 3, you're going to come up with a totally different geometry when that's on. I apologize for my kids, but you're not the ones that really have to suffer from it. So I'm the one that does. And 3, let's see what comes up. And there's a total transformation of units I could have fabricated. And those units transform and change subtly as they go around, mostly by twisting. So if I looked at that, I'd be like, as a sculptor, I'd say, oh, we got to go to the junkyard and get a bunch of car doors, and then you do that assemblage and that installation of what you might do. And people will say, well, I get a lot of comments like, what would you do that for, and why would you do that? As a visual artist and a creative individual, and I'm 48 years old, I simply do it because I'm really into things because it ties me to the spirit than which nothing greater can be conceived. And I'm finding that the more and more I can dissect and transform, and you see there's a little bit of faulting that's happening here on the curve, so I'd probably be wise to leave that at the count I had. I don't know if it was 4. I did have 4. I think 6 is nice in here. And when I do watch these patterns and I see that odd numbers produce different things than even numbers, I usually will then go into the slider and prevent that from happening by just right-clicking and saying, okay, even seem to work better than odds, I'll just change that. And in doing so, I'll say, okay, I made a change to that, so let's go back in and have another version, which would be D. And I'm putting all these files up online for everybody. They are naked script. You do not need any Rhino files with them. The only thing you may want for this is maybe the skeleton to play with a little bit. He's been baked in, but you can get him off of any online source. And I'm one that I'll swap a skeleton for a morel mushroom in a heartbeat, because scale is something we really can play with dimensions in Rhino, but then we can get through and play with the scale. Nice script as it extends in just cluster after cluster, but they're actually not clusters. I treat them more like snippets. And what I do up here is I have just a range of things I can pull in. I never start with a blank tablet. I think, okay, let's get to the geometries, then let's do a couple of things with these other nodes that I have. And that's not really working so much with that skeleton, and I can make more of them to enjoy it. I've got my kids banging pots in the background because they're just awesome. We'll take this up to 8 and see what shape it gets. There it is. Nice little bench form. And I'm getting a good reaction from some very important people, I think, at Grasshopper and at McNeil's. So I'm on to something in the last 2 months. And I, once again, did not learn Rhino. I stepped right into this through Grasshopper in the after using Tinkercad on Tinker Code on Tinkercad online for free. And I started that in November 2018. And then I kind of played with Grasshopper throughout 2019, and then 2020 in this quarantine has absolutely made me appreciate that the future of sculpture, and I've been chair of that program, and I've been there almost 20 years, and I'll be returning as chair of KCAI this year. I realize there's not just a stream of digital sculptors coming through. We are able to do with digital what the sculptor's been asked to do with oxyacetylene torches in the past, with aluminum in the past, with plastics in the past, certainly with plaster and clay and every other thing that's been handed to us. And I believe there are digital modelers out there. I would like to have more of a hand in interfacing with them. I'm talking to schools and many universities right now about how do we get the artist involved alongside the engineer and architect? How do we ask the questions artists ask? And how do we teach it academically? So these are the questions I really have. I'm very, very excited. When I pull something off like this, it's a simple thing to me. It becomes such a simple. I'm embarrassed to put it on, actually. And then when I get a reaction from people saying, "Hey, maybe this is somebody doing things differently," It's just coming at it from 20 years experience, putting clay bricks together in my backyard, casting metal, casting iron. I think the iron workers out there have definitely got to get into this for not just milling their metal directly from robotics and engineering departments, but milling molds. A shout out to Aaron Schmidt. I think he's just a fantastic guy. The people I've met at the recently, I've been meeting at what is it, Appalachian Mountain, Appalachian University. Just blowing me away by the interest in the communities we're going to start. So watch out on Grasshopper online, the forum. We're going to be starting a thinkering group, I believe, from the people I've been meeting, and I'm very excited to see where this goes academically, artistically, and creatively. Thanks for hearing my rant. It's been 9 minutes of fun.